back to the Early Weigh-In podcast. Back at it after UFC 273 to break down Saturday's card. Looks like we're back at the Apex for UFC Vegas 51. It's headlined by a rematch between top welterweights. We got Vicente Luque taking on Belal Muhammad. Luque, the only person to ever finish Belal Muhammad. It's a rematch 5 years in the making. It should be a real interesting one. The winner could find themselves pretty close to the strap, if I'm being honest with you. But man, outside of that main event, does this fight card kind of, fall short being a good one. But a lot of those ones that look bad on paper, man, it's the ones that always end up producing a ton of finishes. Ends up being a good one that flies underneath the radar. Bad night at the office from us both last week. We were hit by another fight that canceled right before the fight night and everything with Rosenstruik and Tybura. But we did give out a couple winning spots. Both of our prop bets from the section and the Mark Madsen by decision and Volk inside the distance hit. Gall versus Mallet under 2.5. Another first round finish there. And I don't really know how the under 2.5 did not hit. And Hamzat versus Gilbert Burns, fight of the lifetime. That fight alone cost us a bunch and maybe a little bit of a square play on Peter Yan at the same time.
Yeah, man. Like you said, tough night at the office and back in the casual cap again this week. We take a look at your card. First off, the Ian Gary play at minus 184, 30-27. The dude, he looked great, and at that price tag, I think that was probably your best play of the night. You talked about Yan kind of being a little bit of a square play. We both knew that he was going in there against some high level competition in Aljo Sterling, and it was greasy. I think we expected maybe a little bit of greasiness in the fight, but we thought
triple the price tag.
Right, and we definitely thought that Yan would start taking over a little bit more dominantly in those later rounds. So that was a big one for both you and I, and to continue on both you and I kind of getting caught up in the hype, Khamzat Chimaev not cashing inside the distance. I think the line that we were getting at minus 165 was the correct play to play him, but obviously just not the right play. You had finished the night minus 3.4 units.
I would have wanted, but on to next week.
Yes, on to next week. Looking over at my card, again, the Yan kind of got in the way, tried to parlay him, and it just, even with a good price tag, didn't pan out. I really overextended on the Chimaev inside the distance. It was in 4.5 units right there, and overall just not a great night. At least I had the Volkanovski inside the distance to kind of stop the bleeding, but still overall not a good night at the office, minus 10.15 units, and tough pill to swallow, but hoping to get back on it this week. In our main event, we have a matchup between two top welterweight contenders between Belal Muhammad and Vicente Luque. This is a 5-round rematch between these two fighters. The original fight taking place a little over 5 years ago, when both these fighters had less than 5 fights in their UFC careers. Since that, both fighters have now eclipsed 15 fights in the UFC, with Belal going 10-1 and Luque going 10-2 in between that time from their first match. Stylistically, I think we have a rather simple fight to break down. We've seen in the past Belal mix in his technical boxing as well as his grappling, but I think he's learned from that last fight with Luque that he's not the guy to try and test your boxing out with, try and stand up with. And maybe the only guy that was able to stand up with Vicente Luque was Stephen Thompson. And MMA math tells you that Belal should have the advantage just coming off of a win over Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and I think that's a perfect fight to look at what I think he's going to have to do in this fight against Luque. Now that's not going to be an easy task against Luque, who's has a much more dangerous grappling game than Wonderboy does. Luque, BJJ black belt, we just saw that on display in his last 2 wins with Michael Chiesa and Tyron Woodley, when he got his quote-unquote favorite submission, the Darce choke. Overall, I think this fight will be much closer than that first meetup between the two, but I think it'll have similar results. Luque's a tough guy to keep on the ground, and I have a hard time believing that in Belal's first full 5-round fight that he's going to be able to keep that pace over 25 minutes. I actually lean towards Luque inside the distance here, but I'm curious to see how you're thinking about it as well before I lay that price tag.
I'm leaning the same way, man. I'm a big fan of Vicente Luque. You know that. Perfect fighter, in my opinion, to throw in a main event slot. He's got 19 of his 21 wins inside the distance. And, yeah, I think Belal gets added to that for a second time on Saturday. He splits time, some in Brazil, some at Sanford MMA, where he's super good friends with Gilbert Burns, who was just in a really good camp. So I'm expecting Vicente Luque to have his head on his shoulders and be in good shape here. Bilal, obviously going to come in here to wrestle, but I think, like you talked about, the clearest advantage of this fight is Luque on the feet. His nasty boxing. He's willing to sit in the pocket and throw with you, money left hook, and he's got an insane calf kick. Bilal's a conventional fighter, man, and we saw Bilal get torn up in that Diego Lima fight by the calf kick. So I think that's just something that's, Bilal being heavy on the lead leg, trying to wrestle in this fight, that calf kick's going to be open all day. And then you mentioned the Darce choke when Bilal wants to take it to the ground. Luque has tools to deter it there and even finish the fight there like Wonder Boy did not. Bilal's just, he's kind of been on our shit list, kind of our fade list. We don't. I will say I think he's a complete fighter, but the guy does not really wow me in any real areas. He's got a pretty good gas tank, a pretty good wrestling, pretty good volume. I know he's going to press for takedowns, but there's no real clear advantage he has in a lot of fights that I see him in. And when I look at this run he's going on, Curtis Millender, worst takedown defense of all time, not in the UFC anymore. Takashi Sato, another example of just piss poor takedown defense. Lyman Good, he's a 50-50 UFC fighter. We haven't seen him since. Diego Lima retired. Damian Maia should be retired. And, coming off a loss. Wonder Boy coming off a loss. It's really not all that impressive to me when you look at a fight like he's going to have with Luque. I go back to the Jeff Neal fight. Another striker in him that has potential to keep this on the feet. And Bilal was just getting tagged up, dropped 2 or 3 times in the third round. I'm on Vicente Luque money line for 2 units, and I absolutely think he can finish it inside the distance.
To speak of another striker that he got matched up again, the Leon Edwards fight. I know we only got 1 full round of that, but we saw how that fight was going. Yeah. Leon Edwards had the tools to keep it standing on the feet, and I think Luque could implement a similar game plan.
I'm with you. The Bilal Muhammad side, I know he's going to wrestle, man. Luque has not faced very many grapplers himself outside of Michael Chiesa. Bilal by decision plus 250. It's like less than 30% implied odds. And if he's going to win, man, I do think Bilal wins this by decision. Luque's never been finished. Bilal has 1 finish. If I'm playing Bilal, it's by decision probably. But, man, I hope Luque just goes in there and starches him. Mm-hmm. In our co-main event, we're in middleweight where we see Kyle Borralho taking on Omar Gadzhi. Pretty weird fight, man, if I must say. You got 2 guys debuting in the UFC from Contender Series, and they're in the co-main event. To their defense, and what I thought was a rather weaker season of talent on the Contender Series, this is 2 of the better guys I thought that they signed. It just screams pass to me from a betting perspective, but in terms of how I'm going to break it down, Borralho he's withdrawn from his last 2, where they tried to match him up with Stolfus and Pickett, which I think are a little bit easier matchups than what he's coming in here to. But he had a big upset on the Contender Series, knocking off Aaron Jeffrey, who was a pretty good prospect at the UFC. He's got a win over Petroski and stuff. On the feet, Borralho's pretty good. Nice southpaw, good straight left, nice high kick. And then with Omar Gadzhiev, he's the 13-0 fighter. I'll kind of let you get into that a little bit. He seems more experienced on paper, man. But outside of his wrestling, I don't really see much I like. I don't know how the gas tank is. I think Kyle is an interesting dog, but I think it could be lined appropriately as the grappling upside could lean to Gadzhiev. Again, pass for me, man, but how do you see this one?
Yeah, I think Kyle's actually a pretty promising fighter. Mm-hmm. He has that karate style stance. He has that in and out movement, mm-hmm. kind of bouncing pretty often in his fights. And he fights for the center of the octagon, and he kind of thrives whenever he's got his opponent on the back foot with their back against the cage. You talked about his straight left, and he throws a lot of those rangy prodding shots, like the teep kick, the side mm-hmm. kick, the oblique kick, and it really disrupts the timing of his opponents and kind of helps him maintain that distance. He's got a very measured approach to his striking game. I personally want to point out the patience that he showed in the finishing sequence in his last fight on the Contender Series. It was a kind of an okay win, but it was up a weight class, and he didn't get overzealous in the finish. You talked about the skepticism and Gadzhi's 13-0 record. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he has. He fought in a lot of Dagestani, Russian organizations on the come up, and he has losses on his amateur record that are right in the middle of his pro record stretch. So, there's a lot of questions on if he's losses. Knockout losses in the first round. There's a lot of questions on if he's truly 13-0. The main problem I have with Gotzi is, judging by the tape, he's just like it looks like he took Khabib's blueprint of how to win in the UFC, and he's rolling with it. But he does allow to kind of stand up in the fight early, and I think that's where he could get into some trouble. If Caio does start figuring out that timing, it's going to be a long fight for Gotzi if he can't get it to the ground. If he does, he is just that mauling Russian, and I think that he could probably 30-27 Caio here. I'm probably going to lay off, but I think live, you could definitely see if how the fight's going to go for Caio, depending on how he responds to that first takedown attempt from Gotzi.
I love the live spot on him. With Baralho in the Contender Series fight, he gave up a ton of cage control to Aaron Jeffrey, and that's something that worries me a little bit here with Gotzi. If who's going to try to push that wrestling pace, he may just be able to kind of hold him up against the cage, maybe hold him on the mat. But then again, when I look at Cal, his Tapology record, there was no footage of it online that I tried to watch, but he went 15 minutes with light heavyweight Jalton Almeida in a grappling match, and staying safe for 15 minutes with a motherfucker like that makes me think that maybe he can stay safe, especially in round one. Maybe start to eat at the gas tank of Gadzhiev, and like you said, maybe if there's a spot live, he does come back and take this one.
Yeah, and to talk more about that gas tank, he had a fight with Waldemar Santos, and that was a five round fight, and he was striking all the way up until the fifth round where he shot a takedown of his own, and I was like, okay, so this guy does have a complete game to him. So I am kind of curious to see if he can extend this fight and kind of make Gotzi show a little bit more of his game rather than just grappling approach.
I haven't bet it yet, but it seems like, to me, potentially a dog or pass situation here.
My fight of the night pick is in the heavyweight division, where we see William Knight taking on Devin Clark. This fight is taking place up a weight class from both these competitors' normal class. It'll definitely be interesting to see them size up after the weigh-ins. Looking at Clark, I've always thought of him as kind of a blown-up middleweight, and then he's been able to make some decent waves at light heavyweight, and it's because of his technical wrestling. But he's always kind of struggled being the undersized guy. For Knight, he's kind of always been known for his brute strength as a fighter rather than his technique. I just saw a video of him last week bench pressing 490 pounds, which shouldn't be possible for an MMA fighter. Although his height has always been an issue for him at light heavyweight, he definitely has the size to hang with anybody. I've never been too high on Knight as a fighter. He's a physical specimen, but he shows some glaring holes in his grappling and his striking defense that tell you that he's still very green when it comes to the technical side of MMA. I think Clark is the far better wrestler of these two and probably the more polished striker out of the two, but there's a huge issue I have with him taking this fight. He's only about 6 months removed from the bottom row of his teeth being smashed into his mouth by Ion Cutelaba. And from the picture that I saw, I can't imagine he's been able to take any hard shots in sparring for the majority of the time between this fight right here. He's now matched up against one of the more menacing power punchers in the UFC, and I do think that he could have some trouble. A fight that I really like to draw on is the Alonzo Menifield-Devin Clark fight. That's another example of Clark being undersized against a power puncher and just narrowly escaping getting finished.
It wasn't for his dad in the corner.
Right, and it wasn't an easy win for him, and he definitely had to withstand that early damage from Alonzo. Now I just think he's up against somebody who has beat Alonzo Menifield and has probably 20 pounds on Devin Clark at least come weigh-in time. I think Clark does get caught, so I'm looking to play. Maybe this is a little tease on my underdog pick as well.
I don't know how I see this one, to be honest with you, man. It's a first at heavyweight for both of these guys. For William Knight, we always talked about him being outsized for light heavyweight. He's definitely going to be outsized at heavyweight moving forward if he's not pretty selective with his matchmaking. But he's on the list of guys that I try to fade almost every chance I get. He's strength over technique, like you said, in a lot of things. There's little to no volume. Striking is bare minimum. He just puts himself, leaves the chin up in the air, backs himself up against the cage, and it's just not what I like to see. And I think it could potentially give Devin the opportunity to land those takedowns if he's backing up against the cage. With Clark, though, you got to give it to the man. He's been in there with some of the best in the division at light heavyweight. And it's really hard to get things going when you look at it. He comes in and puts a few wins together up front in his UFC career, and then he gets Blachowicz. Then you win a fight, and then he gets handed Rakic. he goes on to win like 3 of his next 4, and he gets handed Anthony Smith, and then even like you talked about in the last one with Ion Cutelaba, still a top 15 light heavyweight, but the previous 3 I mentioned are top 5 in the world at the moment. So he's fighting real good competition, man. His dad's got him in his corner motivating him. I think he can push a higher pace for a little bit longer than William Knight's going to be able to. And I got to favor the wrestler, but a minus 180, first time at heavyweight, I'm not touching him, and I feel like there could be some value on your underdog.
I think he's going to come in bloated, and that's what I worry about his cardio. He has been able to keep it up in the past, but I think if he is carrying extra muscle, and he better be if he's fighting William Knight, who's been known to get up to the 250-pound mark out of season, out of competition, I think that his cardio will be a huge question carrying all that extra weight.
For my fight of the night, I chose Rafa Garcia taking on Jesse Ronson. I thought it'd be a good fight to break down. The line's close. Seeing a whole lot of action coming in already on this fight, particularly on Jesse Ronson. And I think I'm leaning the other way. I've already got some action on Rafa Garcia, so I thought this would be a good one to break down and get into here. With Garcia, training out of Denver, Colorado under Trevor Whitman. Phenomenal training partners to work with. Gaethje, Neil Magny. Cub Swanson was a part of getting this guy big for the longest times in his corner and everything like that. Extremely good, strong on the mat. Very good boxing, sharp left hook, durable as hell. And he's one of those guys that came into the UFC on a short notice, but he basically laid his heart out, man. Gave us a fantastic fight on short notice, and his stock went through the roof after that fight with Nasrat. And we see him come in as the minus 300 to Chris Gutzmacher. And, to be honest with you, he almost covered it in the first round with that left hook and pretty much made an amateur mistake. Couldn't put Chris away, and then eventually Chris just walks you down and makes you, use all your energy, using all the lateral movement. And his gas tank failed him, but last time out against Natan Levy, another very talented grappler that he shot 12 takedowns against, wrestled smart at the very end of rounds. I thought the cardio held up perfectly fine, and I'm ready to bank on it. I think holding up perfectly fine in this one against Jesse Ronson. Second time in the UFC, Michel Pereira's, Francisco Trinaldo, Kevin Lee, pretty rough stretch, for your first 3 UFC fights. And he bounced back in his second opportunity there, knocking out Nicholas Dalby at 170 pounds. Man, when you watch that fight, it's one of the worst game plans I've ever seen from Dalby. It's like he didn't respect him. He just, unintelligently, no striking defense, just walks after him. And he gets dropped with a punch. I don't want to really say, too much. It was USADA suspension. But, Ronson's taking it on short notice and things like that. So I don't think he's deliberately cheating here, For the longest time, he was in other organizations where the stuff's allowed, and I personally don't know if you're going to get the same, Jesse Ronson this time around, who's been out more than a year. He's 37 years old. He's going to be able to make, that cut to lightweight for the first time in like 3 years. The last 3 fights have also ended in the first round, so if this guy's historically made to wrestle, that's the way you beat him, and I think that's where Rafa takes over this fight. I think he's durable, I think he's tough, and I think he wrestles his way to a decision here.
Yeah, I think that I'm with you on maybe there's an overreaction to the Dalby win, and maybe even an overreaction to Garcia's loss to Chris Gutzmacher.
Exactly.
I know that there's a lot of controversy of where this fight's taking place, and if it is taking place at 155, I do think that helps out Garcia tremendously. Garcia, honestly, he's undersized for 155, much less 170.
Yeah.
And Ronson's going to have a really tough weight cut, so that's not going to work into his favor. I like it, although it is scary seeing all the love coming in on Ronson.
Yeah,
but
I
I'm
got
with
in
you.
on Garcia early, and seeing that does make me start to worry.
And it's kind of like Mike Mallet last week. You're kind of just guessing on how he's going to look coming back with a full camp. He's 36 years old now, and this is a good test to see if Jesse Ronson ever really deserved to be in the UFC. My fighter to watch is going to be Miguel Baeza. Baeza's now coming off back-to-back losses after such a promising 3-0 start to his UFC career. His last loss came to KO, by KO to none other than Chaos Williams, man. And it was in round 3 of a fight that I thought that Baeza was coasting in, honestly. Sadly, this isn't the first time that we've seen those weaknesses in his chin. I think the first time that I noticed it was in his fight with Matt Brown, where he got caught early. And the biggest red flag in Baeza's game is his inability to move his head off that center line. For what it's worth, his high guard does a decent job at protecting him from single shots, but it's when his opponents throw in combination that we see them start to land on the chin of Baeza. Offensively, Baez is an absolute monster, especially with his leg kicks. He's finished Hector Aldana with him, given Ponzinibbio all he can take, and was killing Chaos with him the entire fight before the KO. So it's definitely one of the strongest suits of his game. And he also has a great jab, good crisp boxing technique, and he looks like he could be a real problem for the division. But that willingness to engage in a slugfest has caused questions surrounding his chin, which is never a good sign for a fighter that's still under 30 years old. Obviously, UFC's kind of testing this theory by matching him up with the notorious, first-round finisher and Andre Fialho. I think it's a great opportunity for Baeza to kind of shut up those doubters, put on a good, solid performance for 15 minutes. But I do think he's going to have to endure that early pressure that Fialho brings in all of his performances, similar to Michel Pereira had to do in their fight. So with Baeza, good head on his shoulders, high fight IQ. I think that he can get it done, but he's going to have to endure that first initial storm of Fialho.
I think it's a good pick for a fighter to watch because what was looked at as one of the better prospects in the welterweight division for a little while, is now, like you said, on a 2-fight losing streak and really needs to get back on track. Definitely think he's a more talented fighter of the two here. Fialho was taking some hard shots from Michel Pereira like 3 months ago. He stepped in on short notice. I won't be shocked if Baeza gets back on track here with the kill shot. But like you said, you've seen him struggle with that Fialho style before, and I think we're in for a very, very fun fight, if you want my honest opinion. For me, man, my fighter to watch, none other than my boy Pat Sabatini. Pat's my dude. I think he is a highly slept-on contender in the featherweight division. He's not the most wowing guy, but man, I think this guy has got very, very legit grappling that could get him a long way in this division. Trains out of a great camp under Daniel Gracie in Philly with Petrosky, Sean Brady, Jeremiah Wells, some very good talent there. He wrestled collegiately, a very dangerous black belt on the mat. He's finished 10 of his 16 wins by sub. That heel hook of Jamal Emmers just shows his ability on the mat. The Tristan Connolly fight was probably what people would say is a hole for him, but the cardio did not look good in round 3, but that's his debut. He's also trying to wrestle a guy that used to be a 170er who was probably very strong on the mat and led to the Tucker Lutz, in my opinion, getting a lot of love that last time out. And Pat Sabatini goes out there and just 30-27s him. I think he's a better wrestler than TJ Laramie. I don't think that Pat Sabatini is the best striker, but I'm not really necessarily worried about the striking of TJ Laramie necessarily in this matchup either. Laramie's been chin checked twice. He's small for the division. Honestly, in my opinion, could be a bantamweight. And he relies heavily upon that wrestling in order to have success, and there's no way you're out wrestling Pat Sabatini on Saturday. I think Pat's got him covered everywhere. I think, honestly, it's kind of a step down in competition, if you want my honest opinion, after beating Jamal Emmers and Tucker Lutz. I don't necessarily get the matchmaking, but I think it's another win on his record. I think he's a safe parlay piece, in my opinion. Won't be shocked if he submits TJ Laramie either.
Yeah, I think you covered everything that you could. You talked about the striking of Laramie maybe being better, but it's the grappling edge that Pat Sabatini has that's so much better that it's probably how this fight's going to be determined. I think that he's a great fighter to watch. My underdog of the week is William Knight. I think William Knight, he's a decent underdog option. He's going to have all the finishing upside here with his power. I think he'll be the much bigger guy in the cage Saturday. Clark, once he loses some of that explosiveness in his takedowns, I think that Knight could even surprise us using his strength and size to win some of those positional battles up against the fence during the fight, which will ultimately win him rounds as well. Not to mention Clark's return to the octagon, I feel is a little premature with the amount of damage he sustained in his last fight against Cutelaba. The line's kind of steadily been moving in favor of Clark this week, so I'm kind of waiting it out until I can get a better number on William Knight. He might make an appearance on my actual betting card, but I do think that as far as the underdogs on this card, he's one of your better options.
I'm with you, man. To be honest with you, I don't think there's a lot of underdogs that come out successful on Saturday, but I think I'm going to lean the other way than you, but I'm definitely not getting to the window on Devin Clark because it's a tricky-ass fight, and I think William Knight makes all of his fights super dicey. But to see him kind of out-grappled by Da Hoon Jung and kind of back up against the fence like that.
I'm pretty high on Da Hoon Jung.
I know, but he's more of a person, prided himself as a striker and was out there just tossing William Knight around and things. So Yeah, but you're right on the Devin Clark side, man. Him coming up to heavyweight, maybe not training that much lately. The gas tank might not be good enough to wrestle like he needs to. And yeah, good luck winning the positional battle against William Knight.
Right.
My underdog of the week is somebody that I'm typically not backing as well. I'm going to take Jordan Leavitt at plus 112. I am not a big fan of this guy at all. I think he's a glorified Chase Hooper at lightweight, if you want my honest opinion. Extremely one-dimensional. Striking is nowhere near where it needs to be, to be in the UFC, and probably has the best manager in the game, man. You get Matt Wyman for your debut, who's off for like 4 years or whatever. Then you get Matt Sales. The guy was just matched up, was coming off the Contender Series. I mean, it's very generous matchups for him. And then, you're getting Trey Hodgson, who's coming here on short notice. Trey Hodgson's game, it takes place where Jordan Leavitt is the best, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. I think the Leavitt sub is inevitable on Saturday potentially. Trey is, like I said, taking on short notice. The guy's not really been consistent over the last couple of years. He's got 2 fights in the last 3 years, the last one over 7 months ago, and I don't think any of that is in your favor when you need to grapple, and that's your type of style. You would like to be in the best shape possible coming into it. Glory MMA as well. I've lost count how many times their fighters lose cardio in round 3 and end up losing. I could very well stab on Leavitt in round 3 here. Hodgson's been subbed in his last 3 losses. So, a guy in Jordan Leavitt, usually not high on him, but for the newcomer to be here on short notice and so much of his success, rely upon where Jordan's so good at, I'm going to go with Jordan Leavitt as the underdog for me.
Yeah, not a usual guy that we're used to backing at all. I think that Ogden, he's a big guy for the division, used to be a welterweight. Right. So if they're both grappling, I think that the strength factor could come into play with Jordan Leavitt. But I do hope he get the win and do your favorite celebration that splits.
Little splits.
Yeah.
FanDuel, they always have those props out there where you can bet how the fight ends by point, sub, TKO. 14 of 19 fights Hodgson's have ended by sub. 6 of Jordan's 10 have ended by sub. Very curious on what that number is going to be. I played the knockout in the main event last week at plus 200. If I can get a line like that, I think this fight 100% probably ends in a submission.
My prop bet for this card is going to be the Nunes by TKO prop, and it's not out on either one of our books yet, but we're looking at it to be 5-1, 6-1 odds.
Nice.
And I think this is just a perfect time to get a killer price tag on a Nunes finish here. As of now, it's been 4 fights in 6 years since we saw the last finish from Nunes, but let's take a look at those last 4 girls. Maya Yamaguchi, who's never been finished in 36 pro fights. Angela Lee, who's the current 1 strawweight champion. Gina Inong, who, to be fair, I would have liked to have seen a finish there, but she's a tough girl, having only been finished 1 time in her 15-fight career. And then lastly, her debut against Ariana Carnelosi. That's a death sentence for the majority of majority of debutantes, and she hit Carnelosi with some shots that would have put out the majority of the roster. Looking at the regional scene footage, she looks like she is 2 different people from then versus now. It doesn't surprise me at all that she got popped with some PEDs, but regardless, those drugs have had a lasting effect on her. Since she's been training at American Top Team, she looks absolutely shredded. I think being under 30 years old and adding a full year training at one of the best camps that you can be training at, she's going to look like a whole new fighter. Hughes doesn't move her head very well at all. She tries to implement a grappling heavy game in the octagon, but rarely does she find success. Even in against some of the smaller girls in the division like Loma Lookboonmee, she's getting out grappled and out muscled. And I think she'll find herself completely outmatched on the feet here, and eventually will get KO'd, or the doctor will step in like the Tisha Torres fight. I really like Nunes TKO here, and I think that this is just a prime opportunity to get a great price tag on it.
You mean we're going to get 5-1 on a TKO prop on a girl that got TKO'd by Tisha Torres? I'm in, dude.
I like it too.
Yes.
I'm
in. You're right. She has little to no head movement, and she's not Nunes is, but not Sam Hughes. Is not patient in her approach. She likes to crash forward, try to press that grappling, and I think her head's going to be on the center line for Nunes to rock all night. And for a woman, Nunes does have some power. And hell, that's a nice line to be able to stab on. Prop I'm going to take Andre Fialho and Miguel Baeza. Doesn't go the distance. Sitting anywhere between -150 and -180 out there on different books. I think we're in for an all-out brawl, if you want my honest opinion, and I wouldn't be shocked if they take home 50K for fight of the night, or one of them takes home 50K for the performance of the night, man, and someone goes to sleep. Both of them been knocked out before. One of them coming off a knockout loss, and one of them coming off a fight just 3 months ago with Michel Pereira, where he took some really good shots, man, and I think that's a good spot where Baeza might be able to even capitalize on a chin that's not fully healed yet. Both of their backs against the wall. The finish is going to get them back on track. Both of them pride themselves on being strikers who are willing to stand in the middle and throw it out. Baeza, definitely the cleaner of the two. I think he's going to stand on the outside, murder up the calf kick, tear it up when Fialho goes to close distance. I think Baez is eventually going to find, that kill shot upstairs. That's my guess how this fight's going to go. But at the same time, man, you look at the Chaos Williams fight, the Ponzinibbio fight, the Matt Brown fight in round one. Someone with good pressure, willing to bite down on that mouthpiece and walk forward, put Baeza on his back foot where he can't let those calf kicks go. Baeza doesn't have the best striking defense himself and leaves that head on the center line. I won't be shocked if Fialho goes out there and lands a shot that puts Baeza away. Ton of them have a ton of finishing upside, and if you're getting minus 170 or even better, I think that's a good number to roll the dice here.
Yeah, I absolutely love that number. I debated on Fialho round one being my prop bet. I mean, I think he finds the chin of Baeza, so regardless of how you're seeing this fight, I think you're getting an excellent price tag at minus 170 if fight doesn't go the distance. For our best bet section, I will be taking the Luque money line. It's still looking like it's floating around the minus 160, minus 170 range. In any rematch, I prefer having the guy who won the first one. But along with that, I think Luque is a horrible stylistic matchup for Belal. I doubt it'll go down the same way as it did the first time with a quick finish. But Luque will make Belal work for a full 25 minutes. And the moment that Belal does start to show signs of slowing down, I think Luque has the game to pounce on him. Right now, Luque's line implies a 60% chance of winning, and I kind of lean closer to him being more towards the 70% chance of winning. So, I love the plus EV on this play. Yeah. I think that it's a solid line, and it looks like it's getting bet down, so I'd hop on it as soon as possible.
I would definitely think that's more of a closer to 70% chance for Luque. I'm in on his money line as well. I think it's a bad matchup for him. He's got him outclassed on the feet 100%, and if he does take this fight to the mat, he does have the submission skills that a lot of Belal's opponents haven't recently. Best bet for me, we both got Boudet on a pretty good line, under minus 200. I would, a lot of times, being a money line bettor myself, give you that as the best bet. But it is about minus 225 now, so let's just take Martin Boudet inside the distance, minus 160, minus 170. Do I really have to go into much detail? I bet motherfucking Gian Villante against Chris Barnett, I'll give the dude all the props in the world. For making it to the UFC, for fighting at this high of a level, but I don't think he is UFC level. I think it's been pretty obvious what they were trying to do so far. Give Rothwell a win, try to give Villante a win in MSG. And I think it's a pretty similar case here, man. I think they're trying to get their Contender Series prospect on a hot start. He's 9-1 as a pro with one loss to Juan Espino, who very talented, and very dynamic, different skill set than a lot of heavyweights have. And while he's far less, experience than Chris Barnett has, man, I think he's got him covered everywhere. I think he's a bit better striker than him. He's 6'4" compared to Barnett's 5'9", and I think he can really put him away he wants. If I had my guess at how this goes, he's going to put Chris on the fence. He's going to land a ton of knees to the body, to the legs. He's going to exhaust him in the clinch, much like Ben Rothwell. We're going to see him eventually take that to the ground, get a ground and pound, get a sub. Boudet inside the distance, man, I think is a killer bet. And if you can get that sub prop 500 plus 500 or better, I think that's worth the stab as well.
Yeah, the Chris Barnett, that was fun for a while it lasted, man. But realistically, I don't think that he could get a win over any other UFC.
I'm with you.
Fighter on the roster right now. And I think you run back the Gian Villante fight, and Villante probably wins that the majority of the time, man. But I can't agree more right now. Boudet's line's getting a little out of whack, getting up there in the minus 220 range and above. So getting him inside the distance, I highly doubt that Chris Barnett, being 5'9", being overweight that he is going to be able to keep up that pace for 15 minutes. And just like that Ben Rothwell fight, it's a full-sized heavyweight versus somebody who's just heavy.
I love it, man. I think he gasses him out too. I think he's mouth breathing by round 2 and probably gives up somewhere in there, man. So I'm like that we're agreeing on both of our best bets this week.
Kicking off our quick pick section of the podcast, we start off with Haley Alatang versus Kevin Kroom at bantamweight.
Yeah.
Personally, I think I'm going to lean Alatang here, although I wouldn't be wanting to lay that price tag on him, but I do favor him in this matchup.
I'm with you. I'm not touching this fight in particular. Kevin Kroom's coming down to bantamweight for the first time here, so I think you should wait at least to see him on the scales if you're going to take the dog shot. Yeah, Alatang Haley for me as well, possibly. Next one up is Estela Nunez versus Sam Hughes. I'm kind of with you on your prop. I think Nunez has real potential to possibly get her out of there.
Yeah, this is Nunez showcase fight right here, and Sam Hughes back to the Invicta League. Moving on, we have Trey Ogden versus Jordan Levitt at lightweight. I think I'm going to go with you and lean Jordan Levitt here, although I hate saying that out loud.
You and me both, man. But Trey's game takes place where Jordan's best, and to be on short notice and things, I think there's value on the dog and Jordan Levitt. Next up, Martin Buday, Chris Barnett, easy one. Martin Buday inside the distance.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Chris Barnett's skill set is on a UFC level, so I'm with you on the Buday. And then moving on, we have Rafa Garcia versus Jesse Ronson. I think that Garcia could be in for a tough fight, man. It's hard to try and guess how Ronson's going to look. I know he looked decent against Dalby, but Dalby showed a low fight IQ in that fight. This is a tough one. I'm going to, I guess, go head-to-head just because it's fun and pick Ronson here.
It's a super tough one, man. I actually got in early on Garcia with some confidence. Starting to dwindle a little bit when you see so many names out there coming in on Ronson as well. Yeah, I'm going to stick with my gut, though. Take my read. Go with Rafa Garcia. Moving on up, 55, or staying at 55, Drakkar Klose coming back, taking on Brandon Jenkins. Drakkar Klose by decision is going to be a good line. I think Jenkins is durable as hell, and Klose don't finish nobody. So I like Drakkar Klose by decision here and plan on trying to bet that.
I like that. I think Klose is the side for sure. Brandon Jenkins, questionably even UFC caliber. Right. And this is a huge step down for Drakkar Klose. So I definitely like him as the side. Moving on, a fight that we haven't touched on at all. It's the Lena Landsberg versus Pannie Kianzad at women's bantamweight. I think the line's pretty wide, man. Like I don't love where the line's set, but I'm gonna lean with it and go Pannie Kianzad. I think Lena Landsberg shows some deficiencies all around in her game, and Pannie should edge this one out. Although I'd never lay that on a women's.
You're right,
fight.
Man. It's women's 135. It's going to the full distance, and you're going to sit there with a minus 400 ticket, so you're going to be probably sweating. But, yeah, I think Pannie Kianzad takes this one, too. William Knight, Devin Clark. Like you said, let's make it interesting. I'll go head-to-head with you. I think Devin Clark's got this one on the scorecards.
I like it. Although I'm still not sure if it's going to make my betting card. I like William Knight here. I think that his size is going to play a huge factor in this one. On our next fight, it's one that's just recently come together. It's Munir Laziz taking on Angie Lusa at welterweight. This one's going to be a great one.
Yeah.
I've seen Lusa in the past. I think that he lost whenever he came on the Contender Series. But Munir is definitely a fun fighter to watch. So I'm going to lean him just because he's not taking – I mean, he's not just stepping in on short notice for this fight. He had a full camp, so I'm looking to lean his way.
Yeah, I mean, he lost to Jack Della Maddalena, who we big fans of, know exactly. Cashed on him, knocking out old Pete Rodriguez. Coming in on short notice, never really in your favor, but I know he trains out of a good camp, used to train with Usman. I'm going to take Laziz, but, in a full camp, it could be a different story. Next one, easy one for me, Pat Sabatini taking on TJ Laramie. I think Pat's got him covered everywhere. That is a level of wrestling I'll back all day long, Pat Sabatini.
I'm with you on that. I think Pat Sabatini should roll. Moving on, we go to a fight that I know you have a little bit more of an opinion than I do. It's Mara Bueno Silva taking on Wu Yanan at women's bantamweight. I think, we could be in for a shit show. Mara Bueno Silva hasn't really shown the highest level fight IQ. So if she does, decide to try and keep this on the feet, I think it could get sketchier than it needs to be. But I do think that she covers Yanan pretty much everywhere.
I'm with you, man. I personally am not a big fan of Yanan Wu. I think she is not really the best of fighters, and I think Mara Bueno Silva has fought some pretty good, tough competition right out the gates for her. Am I crazy about the number? Not at all. But in Pat Sabatini with the parlay, I think she's going to be the right side for me. Next up, super excited fight, man. Andre Fialho, Miguel Baeza. I does not think this sees the full scorecards, but I think Baeza is going to get back on track.
Another one where I guess I'm going to be taking the underdog in Fialho. I definitely wouldn't play him straight up. I like the TKO first round prop. I think that he's shown he's been pretty consistent with coming out hot and then kind of fading towards the end. So that's the only way that I'd want to play him, with the chinniness that Baeza has shown. In the co-main event, we have Caio Borralho versus Gadzi Omar Gadziev, and I'm gonna go with Mr. Free Spirit. You know, I wish that he would go with that as a nickname. It's kind of like, you know, Darren Elkins going with the Punisher. Like, just doesn't really work out. But I do think that he's a pretty promising prospect, and I think he'll get the win.
You know, the more I looked into it and stuff like that, and talking you with it, and seeing some good people that I respect online on Borralho, I think he's got some value sitting there as an underdog. So I don't mind taking him as well. Main event. I think I've went into detail on who I like here. Vicente Luque, inside the distance.
Yes, Vicente Luque is the side. I just don't think Bilal's going to show up in his first real 5-rounder.
Man, we got 14 fights on Saturday. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us, and we'll see you guys next week.
Peace.